Material fields, material harvest, decoration on chain that binds, mirrors gold, the people lose their minds. Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth, the people walk upon. We are the land. Today is now and then. Dream smokes touch the clouds. On a day when death didn't die, real world time tricks, shadows lie. Red, white, perception, deception. Predator tries civilizing us. But the tribes will not go without return. Genetic light from the other side. A song from the heart, our hearts to give. The wild days, the glory days live. Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth, the people walk upon. We are the land. How do we sell our mother? How do we sell the stars? How do we sell the air? Crazy horse, we hear what you say. Crazy horse, we hear what you say. We are the seventh generation.
Greetings, hello, happy Sunday, or whichever day that you're joining us. We're glad that you decided to join us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We are thankful for you being here today. We hope you're at your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength. And we want to start by just giving honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And if you're looking at a screen, and hopefully you are, then you are able to see the picture of Chief Ernie Longwalker and his wife, Warrior Woman. And they are the caretakers of the Red Wind indigenous lands here in Southern California, where I happen to be today. They have 250 acres down here, and Chief Ernie Longwalker made his physical transition some short days or maybe weeks ago. And so we just want to acknowledge Chief Ernie Longwalker from Four Directions in the Red Wind land that they caretake, and Warrior Woman. They were a long time family and allies to the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And I, as well as Shakura, have had the opportunities to travel to Red Wind and participate in their spiritual indigenous ceremonies and to build solidarity with them. And they were indigenous people and are indigenous people who refuse to compromise with the capitalist system. They refuse to accept anything less than land reclamation for the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And you might recall them in 2015. They were invited to speak at the Million Man March called by Minister Louis Farrakhan in Washington, D.C., and we were present. And Warrior Woman and Chief Ernie Longwalker got up and said, "Bomb America," over the microphone, and Fox News and all these reactionary capitalist media outlets made a big deal about it. But they don't understand that we are not liberals, we're revolutionaries. So we don't get any funding. We have nothing to lose. We can speak the truth without fear of repercussions. The most you can do to us is cause us to lose our jobs. And we are prepared to do whatever we need to do to take care of ourselves and each other. So that's not going to sway us from telling the truth. So we give honor and respect to Chief Ernie Longwalker. He was definitely an inspiration to my life personally, an inspiration to indigenous people everywhere, and an inspiration to all peace and justice loving people on the planet Earth. And of course, we give honor and respect to our African ancestors, who are always the reason why we are here, why we do this work. Whenever we get somewhat derailed, we should look at our ancestors, because if you look at the contributions that our people have made to bring us this far, there's no way you should be able to continue to be derailed and demoralized. In fact, it should inject fire into your veins to continue to do this work. So we are thankful again that you all are here. The Our Ancestors Voices, of course, is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And the APRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party, which is based in Africa, with our objective, which is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as the achievement of one unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism, we outline in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which is displayed on this page. The cover is, and that book talks about our strategy on the ground all over Africa to bring about Pan-Africanism. And Our Ancestors Voices is a program hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and my biological and ideological daughter, Shakura. Umi is our last name. The All African People's Revolutionary Party is our organization. And to get us started, I will hand it over to Shakura.
Thank you, kind sir. I appreciate you. So you all, it is more important than ever that we take as much time to really break down what this upcoming quote unquote day of murder, rape, land theft, like what it really represents, especially because we find ourselves at a crossroads where there are going to be some pushback, especially if we push back and if we try to explain to other people what today really represents and what it means. So, I mean, I said today, but we're talking about on Thanksgiving. But I think we should break down what it really means, because I think a lot of people still don't know. I still am very blown away by that, that people really have no understanding of that. And I think it's because we don't do research, we don't talk about things so that we can learn and grow and develop our brains as muscles. And so hopefully the information you take from today, you can still continue to research and add on to it at a later point. And it starts by understanding that the whole concept behind Unthanksgiving is the commemoration of a dinner that took place that was held by pilgrims in Virginia in 1637. And they called it a holiday because they celebrated annihilating the Pocate people. That's why they called it a holiday, and they wanted to remember that day from many, many centuries beyond. They wanted to remember that. So, today is a continuation of that, right? This idea that that is a holiday to be celebrated, right? It's a false holiday. We know that. And really, it's further institutionalizing the idea that it was valid, it was just, and it was appropriate to steal land. It's further institutionalizing the idea that it's okay to steal that land under the intention and the notion that that land was discovered for the first time. And that's really where the basis of all of this comes from, right? And there's so many people who have made jokes and had conversations about how you can't discover something that's already been acknowledged and identified, right? And so I think we really have to kind of flag that, you all. We have to kind of flag that and just be really honest about that. And so, what does this mean? This means that I think the whole purpose of today's seminar is to show us that we can acknowledge Indigenous people and give homage and pay homage and respect to them. And we can still maintain our relationships within our families. We have never asked you, in the years that we've been doing seminars, to acknowledge Unthanksgiving. We've never asked you to stop celebrating it. What we've asked you to do is to have some commitments to your discipline of your values and your morals, and to acknowledge what the day represents while you still have your memories intact with your families, while you still manage to continue to build memories with your families. We just want you to be critical in how you build those memories, and we want you to be able to think for yourself on why you're doing the things that you're doing. So that's been the whole purpose of all of this, is because a lot of folks don't really understand what the day truly represents. And they only celebrate it because their family celebrate it. And then when you ask them, like, well, why do you celebrate a day that, kind of highlights thousands and thousands and thousands of people being killed? Well, people say, well, I don't celebrate like that. I just go to my parents' house to get food. And it's like, okay, well, we got to really kind of break down though, like what our level of tolerance is for what that kind of breaks down into, right? Like, what is our intention behind not celebrating it, but also not acknowledging Indigenous people? In my opinion, you can acknowledge the Indigenous people and you can eat and enjoy your family, right? Both things can be true at one time. And so I think just kind of breaking that down and thinking about why we don't have as much information about the day, I think is really key. Also, it helps us to kind of understand this is, again, the work of imperialism, of capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy. I mean, you can take your pick, because the intention is to keep that kind of information, to keep the fact that the Pocate people were annihilated in 1637, to keep that silent so that we don't have access to that information. The more that we are missing, the more information we don't know, the more ignorant we will be. And capitalism thrives best when we are ignorant. They thrive best when we are ignorant, because when we don't have information, we are unable to make critiques. We're unable to think about things, to break them down, to assess them, to dissect them. We are unable to put pieces together. We're unable to do that because we're lacking the bridge, if you will. We're lacking the base, if you will. We're lacking the purpose of why we should take a stand against this day in the first place. And so Capitalism loves that. That's why it's been a continuation where the propaganda has continued to push down our throats, especially if we were educated in a colonized area. Then it's continuing to push down our throats that we need to celebrate this day because it was discovered. This land was discovered and had never ever been identified, which means that really we're acknowledging that indigenous people did not ever exist and that this is not their land and that we should not acknowledge what has happened to them. And so it's like these are three very dangerous promotions that you are endorsing by celebrating this day. And it's very important that you really think about that, right? It's so important that you think about that, especially because you can't just wipe out an entire group of people and not acknowledge that their land starts from the very top of Canada and goes all the way down to the bottom of Chile. So you can't in any logic just say that they just never existed. That's going to be really hard to support. That's going to be really hard to support because then we would start to ask too many other questions because we do know how to think critically, right? And so we just encourage you all to, figure out what that represents for you, acknowledging how to keep hold of your principles, how to be devoted to your commitments and your values, your morals. And if your values and your morals acknowledge that you have a responsibility to support the indigenous people and their struggle, it might also acknowledge that you understand how much the indigenous people have already done for African people, then you are in a better position to be able to show up for them. You are in a better position to represent them. You are in a better position to support them and to not endorse the holiday for what it represents, but instead to help educate and to speak out against the contradictions of the holiday, against the fact that it shouldn't even be a holiday. And it requires you to really take a stand, right? When I speak to my friends, they ask me, what are your plans for? And then they say the holiday term. And I say, well, for unthanksgiving, I'm actually planning to work on this. You know what I'm saying? And so it's kind of like we have to reinforce you all how we are choosing to resist. We have to reinforce it. It's going to be really important that we kind of take those stands because we would be surprised by how many people are impacted by us taking a stand. I've noticed that I talk to my friends and they are less likely to say Black. They're less likely to say Native. They're more likely to say African or African descent. And they're more likely to say Indigenous now. And I know when I first met them, they weren't using those terms. So I'm sure that there were other influences besides me, and at the same time, I'm grateful that the reinforcement has been there because I'm committed to those principles, because I'm committed to speaking my truth and to standing out against these things. And that's really what it's going to come down to. So when someone asks you tomorrow at your job, or when you go to pick up your kids from daycare, or when you go to do whatever, that's what it comes down to in terms of kind of acknowledging that. And I'm sure Comrade Ajamu is going to talk in a moment about how, you might bring down the mood when you say, well, it's a day that represents murder and death. So I'm not going to, and then, oh, yeah, that might probably, but that's a good reaction. That's a good reaction because that means that everybody who's saying, oh, realizes that they still have some humanity left in them. If they are that disgusted by what you're saying, what we don't want is for you to say, well, it was a day for rape and robbery of land, and people to say, well, those are the breaks, right? Like that's not what we want, right? So I think it's good if people respond in that way because that means they still have an ounce of humanity left, and you can play that to your best knowledge. You can play that to your best foot, and you can remind them of why it's important for them to hold on to their humanity. That's the one thing that capitalism is clearly attacking first and foremost is our ability to see humanity and humanism in one another. Next slide, please. So we have to do everything we can to hold on to that. And we also have to understand this land we are on is stolen, especially if you are located anywhere from the very top of Canada to the very bottom of Chile. You have got to acknowledge that, you all. You have got to practice it, research it, learn the name of the indigenous land name. And when people ask you where you're located, you should say the indigenous name. You might also say Memphis, Tennessee, But what I usually say is Cherokee land, and then I say colonized as Memphis, Tennessee, because not many people are going to know where Cherokee land is. Not many people know where Memphis is either. It's a flyover state. But my point is, you will start to re-educate. That's what we're trying to get you all to do. Thinking critically, re-educating, decentering colonization, and recentering indigenous people, their culture, their worth, their value, and their land names, calling the land what it actually is supposed to be called. So yeah, you can't expect to have freedom on stolen land. You can't. The refrain for today in the US, beyond Canada, and even is that these lands, they weren't even actually stolen. There are people who have set up arguments to make that. And these arguments are based off of that there was some agreement that created the current reality that we find ourselves in. As a thief who broke into your car, maybe they made an agreement with you to violate your car, because that would be the same logic where we would agree with that if we were to accept that these lands weren't actually stolen, but there was an agreement made between the thief who stole the lands, the colonizers, and the indigenous people. Well, first and foremost, if you are just a logical person, you know that that just simply doesn't make sense. No one would endorse having something stolen from them or violating them in that way. No one would endorse that. If you are a revolutionary or if you are an organizer, you also know that that doesn't make sense. Because to say that colonized people made an agreement to say it's okay that you violate us and take this from us, that just simply doesn't make sense. And that's exactly the problem with capitalism and the problem with imperialism. It's too consistent with the same pattern, you see? Because that would mean if indigenous people made an agreement for their land to be colonized, then that might also mean that African people made an agreement to not only have their land be colonized, but to also be kidnapped, right? Because you can't say that it's the case in one situation and it's not the situation in another. Well, that means that Irish people also made an agreement to be colonized, right? That means that Filipino people made a decision to be colonized, right? People in Cuba made a decision to be like, we could go on, you all. And this is why thinking critically is so important, because then you can start to think of all these little examples and you're asking yourself, that doesn't make sense. And then you might say to yourself, make it make sense. Well, it can't, because it doesn't. So then you start to understand okay, the system has set up this lie and they've been feeding it to us for all these years. But I finally understand that it was based on a mistruth and it is simply not true. And that is where you actually can start to celebrate thinking for yourself and independently as one of the first things that you can do in terms of resisting, but also identifying what the next steps will be, potentially joining an organization that's working for justice, or at least starting to increase more of your political education. Because if that was a lie that was fed to you and told to you, what else is a lie that you haven't pinpointed yet? Right. And so just starting to break these things down, you all, that's really what it comes down to. We can't just accept that things are what they are. And we certainly can't trust what our history classes or our herstory classes or our their story classes have taught us. Everything is based on celebrating and promoting capitalism. We do know that by now, right? We do know that everything out there in the universe is based on supporting and promoting capitalism. Rhetoric, information, data, all of it is designed to support and promote capitalism. We have got to understand that, you all. So if that is in fact the intention, then we have no business trusting any of that information, at least not without cross referencing it, which again requires a critical lens, right? But we can't just simply accept information as it is presented to us, because who's to say that it's based on evidence? Who's to say that it's based on truth? Who's to say that it's based on humanistic approaches? None of those things are guaranteed. It's all about how you give information. No one ever said that the information had to be true, okay? And that's dangerous, because if you're ignorant and you're spewing out information, then you are no worse than the colonizer. You were no worse than the oppressor. You were no worse than anyone who is trying to stop humanism from growing and egalitarianism from growing, compassion, justice. You're trying to stop all those things. If you're spewing out rhetoric that is simply not true, you are definitely trying to get in the way of that. And so that means that you're not working in the best interest of the people. You're not working in the best interest of the masses. And therefore, you are a threat to us. So, we have to really break that down, you all, and just really start to think about that a little bit more. If you're African, you could apply this same analogy to Africa. The only difference is you would be seeing it as, for the indigenous people, their land has been stolen, again, from the very top of Canada to the very bottom of Chile. And the same is true for Africa. You can think about Senegal and how the French have stolen that land from Africa. You can think about Britain and how they have stolen Ghana from Africa. You can think about so many other examples, Guinea-Bissau, how the Portuguese has stolen that land from Africa and African people. It is the same. So if you're not going to get upset about the fact that indigenous people have their land stolen, which you should, because they have always had your back, you should at least get upset about the fact that a colonizer has also stolen your land. And then maybe you can start to make the equation make sense, because stealing land is stealing land, right? It doesn't matter if you're for a group of people or not. If their land was stolen, and if you understand what that feels like, then you should be behind them and helping them to get their land back. This is precisely why we have taken the position of being anti-Zionist, because we want to support occupied Palestine and Palestinians getting their land back. We want to support that. Hashtag land back by any means necessary. So we will continue on with this seminar, and we hope that you all will take what we are saying and use it so that you can continue to think for yourselves as you continue to move through this propagandized holiday season that we are approaching. Ashe.
Ashe. Thank you. Obrigada. Asante Sana. And we want to reckon back to the music you were playing before we started today, Shakur. We usually try to play something before we start at 4 p.m. Pacific time. And today, Shakur was playing John Trudell. And if you don't know who John Trudell is, he was an organizer within the American Indian movement. And he was among the leadership of the American Indian movement in the 1970s. And all of their, very high profile actions, like when they went into the town of Wounded Knee, and before that, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and everything that they engaged in confrontation against the U.S. government to raise the question of land reclamation. John Trudell's family was, his wife and children were murdered by FBI supported the Goon Squad in South Dakota, they called them. And in the record that Trudell was playing, he of course has also made his physical transition, but he was talking about how do we sell our mother? How do we sell our mother? And what he was saying is, when you have land as a people that is the basis for how you establish your culture, your legacy, how do you put a price tag on that? How does the capitalist world steal your land and then offer you money as compensation for that? And that really resonated with me, because I don't think there's any way that they can do that. There can be no price tag placed on the theft of our land. There can be no price tags placed on the institution of chattel slavery. There can be no paychecks issued to alleviate hundreds of years of pain and suffering. And anyone who expresses that there could be a paycheck issued to compensate for that is just somebody looking for a payday that has no qualms about selling out the dignity of our people. Plain and simple. So we want to talk to you today about healthy alternatives. The purpose of today's program is to give you some concept of how to navigate through these backward holidays as they happen. And, for example, I'm here in Long Beach, California today for a family event. And I go to all the family events I help. This is a birthday event, and I come to all of them. I do my best to help with the setup and the breakdown and contributing to shopping, picking up supplies, doing all of those things, because this is how you build and maintain relationships with your loved ones. And we want you to do that this time of year. We don't want you to isolate yourself from your loved ones. We don't want you to boycott your loved ones. That does nothing to advance our struggle. Now, if you have an individualistic and idealistic perspective of our struggle, and you think that by you living some higher than mighty lifestyle and by boycotting from other people who don't understand your lifestyle, that somehow in your warped brain, that's you making some sort of contribution towards the emancipation of oppressed people all over the earth, then we would respond and say that that's a extremely faulty sense of logic. We are revolutionaries. So, as such, we understand that the road to our freedom and liberation requires us to raise the mass consciousness of the people. And you can't do that by boycotting the people. You can't do that by isolating yourself from the people. You can't do that from only spending your time around people who already agree with you. The only way that can happen is how I spend 95% of my life being around people that have no understanding of what I believe in and how I conduct my life, no understanding whatsoever. Even the situation I'm in right now, that's the reality. People here, they don't have any, they know I'm out here doing some kind of show. They don't really know what it's about, but they ask questions because I'm out here doing it while they're inside socializing. So when I go in there, it gives me the perfect opportunity to explain the importance of this work. And if I'm isolating myself from them or boycotting them, I'm not ever able to do that, am I? So this is the mindset that we want to suggest that everyone get in. And in order to do that, I mean, the first question that has to be asked is, where do you stand right now with your family and friends? Like, what types of relationships do you have with them? A lot of people who claim to be radical activists, particularly, because that's what we are, revolutionary activists, radical. A lot of people who take on that uh, framework are oftentimes under this mistaken reality that, that the definition of that lifestyle is some rugged individual approach to the struggle, and that you don't need having family is weakness. Engaging in social connections with people is not necessary. And we want to, explicitly challenge that here, that your family, if you are serious about social change, then that means you have to be committed to uplifting people's consciousness. And the lowest hanging fruit, meaning the easiest people that you're ever going to have to talk to, are your family members, the people that love you, your friends. Those are the easiest people that you're going to have to talk to. So if you cannot talk to them, then there's no way you're going to be talking to anyone else. And if you're not doing that, there's no way that you're doing any kind of substantive work to advance our struggle. You're not doing substantive work by just having higher than mighty values and acting like you know more than everybody else and having nobody to talk to. That's accomplishing nothing. And eventually we all will die, and you will not have no legacy of what you've been able to pass on to people that can help continue the struggle. So this is why it's important to build relationships. Now, we're not here saying that if you don't have relationships, you're a failure in life, because it's never too late to do this work. The revolution is going nowhere unless we take it somewhere. So if we had the capacity to do that already without you, we would have done it already. We wouldn't be talking to you. So you're needed. You're needed in this work. And so the first question you got to ask yourself is, if you're not on a solid standing with your family and friends, and what we mean by that, defining it, is that you're respected by them. The way you live your life is respected by them. They don't have to understand every aspect of it. They certainly don't have to agree with it. But because you have demonstrated the consistency for what you believe, they have a respect for it. And if you haven't demonstrated this consistency, then that's where you need to start. That's what you need to look at. How can you begin to do that. I know when I was in my early 20s, 22 to be exact, and I, went through the process to officially change my name and was new to the party's work study process and went and explained to my mother and father that I had changed my name. Their reaction was nothing short of complete hostility. And a lot of that hostility was coming from a place of concern for my welfare. Because one of the things that COINTELPRO has accomplished effectively is to terrorize African communities by terrorizing the organizations that had the audacity to stand up for us. And so when they did that, the messaging was clear to people. If you engage in radical activism, you're risking your life. And that was the consciousness about that my parents possessed. So they were genuinely afraid and didn't know how to, do anything other than to go off on me when I started telling them what the direction my life was taking. And I had a number of elders in the AAPRP and outside of the AAPRP, African elders. And thank God for those wonderful people, many of them, most of them who are no longer here. But thank God for them, because what they all told me is that the key is consistency. If you are consistent and respectful, because revolutionaries should always be those two things, consistent and respectful, then it will take time, but eventually your parents will come around. That's what they told me. And so for me, the way I define that is I told my parents, you don't have to call me a Jamu Umi. You don't need to do that. If you're not comfortable doing that, you don't need to do that. They're the only people on earth that I had said that to. I didn't give anyone else that option, but I did give them that option. And I told them, you call me, I'm your son. I love you. You call me whatever you want. And then the second thing I did was I was consistent. When my parents would come to where I lived in Sacramento, they would see all of my friends, all of my coworkers, which meant that my name was institutionalized and official at work, call me a Jamu. Nobody called me by my slave name, which was Richard. No one called me that. So they saw the consistency. They met the people I work for, my European supervisors, and those people had to call me by my African name because that was the only name that I had. And so over time, just like the elders told me, my parents began to come around and they began to start calling me a Jamu. So don't give me any of this nonsense that, your family is this and there's no way you can talk to them. That's you and your ego. There's a way to talk to everybody. It just requires taking the time and effort to figure it out. And if you're committed to the struggle, that's what you have to do. So that's the first thing you have to do, is do that work. And while you're doing that work, you can start engaging your family in the ways that we're talking about now, because as you do that work, you will begin to earn the respect of your family like I had to earn the respect of mine. You will begin to earn the respect of people around you like I had to earn the respect of people around me. People would always ask me, well, what's your nickname? And I tell them, I don't have a nickname. Well, I'm just going to call you John because I can't pronounce your name. I'm like, well, I'm not going to answer you. I said that to bosses that I had on jobs. I'm not going to answer you because that's my name. You tell me you can't say a name, and there are all kind of dialectical things that will help you. Like little kids who aren't inhibited by all the garbage that's between the ears of adults. They had no problem ever getting my name. John, little 3-4-year-olds, a Jamu. And then that made the adults look stupid. So they had to reconsider how ridiculous they were being with their backward stance that they couldn't even pronounce the names. So all these things will help you. So as you're doing that work, don't be concerned about imperfections. You're always going to have those. The only thing you have to be concerned about is being genuine, right? And the respect will come. So, if once you are ready to embark upon that path, just consider how you can make some brief and simple adjustments. What we do, Shakur and I and our families, is we institutionalize ceremonies. In other words, we don't tell our family members, well, don't celebrate no Thanksgiving. Again, the elders told me be humble. So what my approach is my wife likes to fry turkeys on these holidays. So I get out the turkey fryer in the backyard and I fry the damn turkey. Okay. That's what I do. I mean, I lose nothing in terms of my morality and my principles by frying a damn turkey. I do that. Um, when she wants to put out her thing is African Santa Clauses. She doesn't want to put out a European Santa Claus. So she has these dolls and she puts them around the house. She doesn't do a Christmas tree because I think she recognizes and once that's her offering to me not to have that. So she puts up the African Santa Clauses and I help her get them out of storage, our storage in the backyard, and dust them off and clean them off and put them up. It costs me nothing to do that. And by virtue of me supporting, how she wants to maneuver through these days, then I feel like I get some support in return from her. One of them is not doing the damn Christmas tree. Another way is ceremonies, because I want to have ceremonies. Like we all like to eat. I don't want to tell people don't eat. I'm not going to boycott the meal. I love meal, and especially my wife is an outstanding cook. So I'm not a fool. I want to partake in that food, but I want to do it in a way that honors our ancestors, that honors the people who have stood up and fought for justice. So we always have a ceremony, nothing more than 5 minutes. We'll do one next week. And what we'll do is we'll do a libation, nothing extravagant. We'll do a libation. We'll talk about the indigenous people. We'll talk about how this backward ass holiday was started, and we'll ask people to make a brief comment about that, and then we'll go on with the day. And the day consists of the food, the TV's on, people want to watch football, whatever they want to do. The point is that the ceremony helps shape the environment for the day. It puts it in a different standing. Now I'm working on moving off of doing any of that on that same day, but that's going to take some time. But at least at this point, what we've been able to accomplish is getting people to understand that we want to look at this through a different lens. We don't want to just parrot what the capitalist system is telling us that they want us to do. So that's the first part. And I think after that, it's important not to overthink what you're doing. Most of what happens on these imperialist holidays is just the conditioning that our people have been, overwhelmed with for their entire lives. So most people, most of the time, they'll welcome anything fresh. So when you tell them, hey, we want to have a quick little ceremony to acknowledge people who are suffering, nobody is going to say, well, I don't want to do that. And if they are, you just ignore them and keep going with what you're doing. But 99.9% of the people are going to be welcoming to that because they want to feel, everybody wants to feel like what they're doing has meaning. And since these so-called holidays are built on a foundation of death, destruction, settler colonialism, violence, people, even if they don't talk about that, they have a general even if it's superficial understanding of that. So when you come and bring something fresh, I think what you'll find is that people are very open to accepting that. So be creative and bring something into the picture. Somebody reached out to me and said that they have started doing a puppet show on Thanksgiving. They do a little puppet show, a 5-minute puppet show about settler colonialism. And it's to the point where people come to the house and they're like, I just want to make sure we're still having the puppet show. Okay, that's wonderful. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a Fidel Castro speech. That's not it. All it has to do is be something that can help people understand we need to think and move differently. That's it. And then once you can do that, you can assert more meaning to the day. It'll make the day mean more to you and the people around you. Like I'm saying, it'll make people feel like, okay, this makes a lot more sense what we're doing right now. It's not just, something you'll find that you have allies is my point. You know, when you bring this up and you talk about doing it, some people that you didn't even realize were thinking like this will come and say, yeah, you know, I think that's good. We should be doing something different. And that's refreshing, because all of that will make you feel much more productive, because you'll be working on the right side of history. And most importantly, you'll be building ties with your family and friends that helps them understand the work that you do. And that cannot be, the importance of that cannot be overstated, you all, because especially with what's happening now, right? You saw last week in this backward country that we live in, you saw last week that the U.S. Congress struck down a measure that would allow, you know, this Trump administration, when they come to power, to go after, they said, nonprofit social justice organizations. But it's not just nonprofits. That the list of organizations that they intend to target is very large. Of course, many of the organizations you belong to are on there. The All African People's Revolutionary Party is on there, as is the case with many organizations. And we don't know what this will mean. And we're not going to sit around here terrified of these people, because they're criminals. This is a criminal empire that we live under. And we're trying to raise a struggle to bring people around to the consciousness that we have to do work to change the empire. So of course they're going to come after us. I mean, you have to be a living idiot to think that that would never happen. Of course, if they're not doing anything to try to sabotage your work, then just because you ain't doing nothing. But if you're doing anything meaningful, here they come. You know, so we're not going to change anything we're doing. That tells us we need to do more of it. That's what that means. But whatever they decide to do, and I'm not, you know, of course, I don't want anything to happen to you or me or anyone else, but I'm not a coward either. So I'm going to continue to do the work that I know needs to be done, and let the chips fall as they may, like everybody that came before me did. You know, if they would have been sitting around talking about, well, I can't take no risk, then guess what? You'd still be in chains on the plantation. You'd still be dealing with that. The only reason why you're not is because they had the courage to stand up despite the consequences. So I'm not a weak coward. I'm not going to do anything less than that. But it's important that you have strong ties with the people around you, because if these people move against you, you're going to need to rely on these people to give you the support that you need. And if you're isolated from them, if you're boycotting them, that's not going to happen. You're going to be on your own. And the system of oppression is relying on that. They're relying on that. So that's why, you know, that's another reason, besides the conscious raising is the major part of it. But the other part of the conscious raising is making folks conscious of the risk that you take by making the decision to do this work on the side of justice, right? To be on that right side of history. And then I think the end result is that you have to have a purpose with what you're doing. You know, if you're advocating changes, but people don't view you as a representative change, then your efforts are not going to be successful. So, you know, you can have any kind of ceremonies you want next week and next month that you want to have. But if you're a contradiction, you know, you're not taking care of, you don't treat your partner right, you don't respect your partner, you don't respect the people around you, you don't take care of your children in a respectful way, you don't raise your children, then nobody's going to listen to you. And don't say that these aren't things that are, these are things that are, those of us who really try our best to take our work seriously have had to deal with those of you out there that aren't taking our work seriously all of our lives. Because when we come to people, again, I told you, our work is working with people we don't know. We don't just talk to people we know all the time. So when we come upon people, we are constantly having to answer for your transgressions, because people are going to see you being inconsistent, and that's going to frame for them how they think about social justice work. You know, because that's the propaganda that they've gotten about social justice work. So it falls nicely into why they can say, well, I don't have to do that because these people aren't even serious about doing anything different than what they say the power structure is doing. So it's very important that you be consistent and that you represent values that people can respect. Because then when you come and they're having their so-called holiday and you say, hey, let's have a ceremony, they will want to listen to you because they'll look at you like, man, I can learn something. I can become a better person by including what this person is doing in my life because I respect them. And that's what will happen. And if you approach it that way, even if you're not there, you'll find that they'll start doing the ceremony without you because they won't want to go forward with any of this without having that sort of morality involved in what they do. And so, a very good approach is to take it that way. People will understand better what you're doing, and then they will come to ask you questions about what you're doing, the work that you're doing. They'll come to ask you questions about that, right? Like I had people here and I told them like an hour or so ago, well, 2 hours ago, that we were going to pick up it was a non-patriarchal birthday. So it was for the women and the men identifying folks. Our job was to, do the work to pick up the women and allow them the chance to enjoy the celebration. And so I told them, well, I can go pick up some of the folks. I have a rental car down here. I can do that. But I need to be back so I can prepare for our broadcast. And so people, they've been working with me all day. I just met a lot of them today. They're my stepdaughter's friends. So I didn't know them. But I told them, well, this is what we do. My daughter and I do this, broadcast. And then people, we talked about it, and couple of them were like, give me the information on it. I mean, they're traveling today, but this is how we build capacity, you all. And the reason why it works like that is because they're not looking at me like I'm some sort of self-righteous, violent predator that calls himself a revolutionary. They're looking at me like, man, this dude comes, he works, he's contributing, he has a heart for people. I want to see and hear what he's all about. We had to go to Costco to buy a bunch of groceries for today's party. And when we were loading up our groceries, there was an elder woman who was had a bunch of groceries, and she was next to us. So I asked her, well, do you need help? And she was like, oh, please. And so I helped her load her stuff in her car. And the people with me said, well, man, you have that's a good heart to do that. So then when I start talking about this our ancestors' voices, they're like, okay, I want to check you out because you have values that I appreciate. This is how you build that capacity. It's like when we had our breakfast program, we were feeding children. And when we were feeding the children, the parents would come. And when the parents would come, we would start talking to them about the movement and the struggle. And they had to listen because we're feeding their children. Well, this is the same principle. I'm not saying we were feeding them as a tactic. We're feeding them because they didn't have food and they needed to eat. But yes, a part of that work is in building relationships with the community so that they can begin to see revolutionaries as a positive social force. Because what capitalism has done is convinced everyone that revolutionaries are violent criminals. They cannot be trusted and are only out for themselves and their own self-interest. And it's reinforced everywhere around you if you pay attention. If you look at the Black Panther movie, and a lot of you love that movie, Chadwick Boseman and Michael B. Jordan, the character Michael B. Jordan played in the original movie from 2018, his character was supposed to be the revolutionary. He was talking about how the resources needed to be utilized for the people. That's revolutionary rhetoric. That's what he was saying in the movie, and how they needed to seize the resources from, international imperialism and use them on behalf of African people all over the world, Well, that sounds like the APRP, but then his character in the movie was anything but what we would want to be. He was vicious and violent towards the people of, this imaginary Wakanda. He was vicious and violent. He was um, uh, uh, temperamental. Just look at the movie if you don't remember, because it's so subtle, and most people don't pay attention to anything. So you probably missed it. But go back and look at the movie and you can see what I'm talking about. This is how revolutionaries are consistently portrayed. Consistently. And the reason why they do that, that's why when you tell people, well, I'm engaged in, I believe in whatever you do that, I'm a Marxist, I'm a socialist, I'm engaged in revolutionary organizing work, people like, oh, they look at you like, oh, you must be somebody that's here to create problems. They look at revolutionaries as the people that create problems instead of the people that are trying to figure out how to solve the problems. So this is why it's important that we do work differently. I was at a meeting this week and we're talking about in Sacramento where I live. It was a meeting largely attended by young people. I'm by far the oldest person in there. But I had young people in the APRP with me in there and a whole bunch of other people, like 50 some odd people, and people talking about, stuff that needs to be done to protect our communities. And so, they wanted me to do a workshop, which I'm going to do when we do this big event at this church in January about political education. And some of the young people, they subscribe to anarchist philosophical perspective, which is fine, but they're talking about, well, we don't want to be in one organization. And I just told them honestly, like, I'm not advocating, you can't be in the organization with me. We're doing revolutionary Pan-African work. You can't help me with that. You don't know anything about that. You probably couldn't even point out a single country in Africa on a map. I'm not putting you down. I'm just saying, get over yourself. Don't stop centering yourself. This work has nothing to do with you. We're talking about building political education, because these young people were European, and I told them what we want is, we don't want to sit down and be at no work study with you, because we're studying Kwame Nkrumah and Fidel Castro and Sekou Touré and Amilcar Cabral. You don't even know who those people are. So that's not what we want. We have that already. We're doing that. What we want you to do is go out and organize the European youth and engage them with political education, have a political education program for them, because you all don't do that. The only people talking to European youth are the right wing, the neo-Nazis, the militias, the 3%ers, the Sons of Odin. Those people are doing the work I'm talking about in this program today. Those racist white supremacist organizations are doing that work with white youth. And the white left is doing none of that work. And so that's what we told them. We want you to go and get your people, because when we go to move, your people are used against us to stunt our ability to gain progress. And if you don't understand what that, all you got to do is lightly study history. Every time we rise up to make a social change anywhere on earth, it's working class Europeans that are the shock troops against us. So you got to do the political education work with your people, and we will do it with ours. And that's what I said. And oh, okay. So my point is that this work we're describing, this is how you do it. You build relationships with people. You use these opportunities, these so-called holidays, as opportunities to do that. You don't isolate yourself. I don't ever do that. I'm always with people. I'm not even, I'm an introvert person, but I'm always with people, because you've got to build relationships. If you're serious about doing this work, you've got to build relationships. If you want to know how to gauge whether you are serious about social change, answer the question, what relationships are you building? And if the answer is, well, not really building any relationships, then you're not doing anything to make the world a better place. The world will not be a better place just based on what's happening between your ears. It will only be a better place when we get out here and we do work to make it a better place. What are we waiting for? Let's get started. Use these times at this time of year as your opportunity to make these things happen. If you need any help with any of that, you know how to reach us. And so we want to thank you for joining us. We want to invite you back next week, Sunday, November 24th. is the commemoration of the November 22nd, 1970 invasion of Portugal into Guinea, West Africa. And what we want to talk about is we're not just doing this event to engage in a long, historical, boring narrative of history. We're here to help folks understand, why did Portugal attack Guinea in 1970? There are concrete reasons why that happened, and they're related to Guinea's support for the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, which Portugal was colonizing Guinea-Bissau, Guinea's support for Kwame Nkrumah when the CIA overthrew his government in Ghana, Guinea's courageous support for African liberation movements everywhere on earth, all throughout Africa, and even in the Western Hemisphere. Their hosting of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in 1964, the acceptance of Kwame Ture, who was then Stokely Carmichael, to come live in Guinea and become the political secretary and aide to Kwame Nkrumah and Secretary Ture. All of these things are the reason why imperialism, Portugal backed by Western capitalist intelligence agencies, invaded Guinea. So that's what we want to talk about, because that's important history that we all need to know, and the courage that the Democratic Party of Guinea, an organization that still exists, that we are still in unity with, is important for all to know. So we want to invite you here for that. The QR code in the upper left-hand corner, you can check out AAPRP programs, the Forward Ever broadcast, the Pontula podcast, obviously our Ancestors Voices is in there, and other programs that we have. And then we want to invite you to the Forward Ever shop. Y'all know you're going to be spending your money on these imperialist holidays, right? And I'm not criticizing you for that. But what I am saying is you should support African organizations fighting for justice. You shouldn't just support some business that gives nothing to the community. So our Forward Ever shop, you can reach it through the party's website, www.aprp-intl.org. You can buy hoodies like the one that I'm having on now, if you see it, that advance our people's struggle. So go on there and order up some gifts that mean something. You'll feel better giving these gifts out than the ones you give out already. And you can find out, I'm writing, I've been bit with the writing bug again, and it had been gone for about a year. It's back. So I'm writing prolifically. So you can go to hoodcommunist.org. I have articles that Hood Communist has posted, and then the Hood Communist is good. Whoever has articles up there. And then at betterworld.me, I have a number of other articles that I've written that are talking mostly at this point about the capitalist election that happened in this country last week, and some different perspectives that you're not going to see on CNN and CIA networks. So check those out. And again, go to AAPRP-INTL and join the AAPRP, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and contribute to the party. You can do that by going to AAPRP, or I'm sorry, Venmo at A-APRP, and PayPal at AAPRP, no dashes. And then we want to ask you to go to the bottom right corner, the QR code there, the black QR code, black and white one, for Burkina Books, one of our on-the-ground programs in the APRP. Support that, become a regular sponsor, even if you can only contribute $10 a month to the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. Please do that. That we're trying to build the consciousness of our people on the ground in Africa. That is our strategy to achieve Pan-Africanism. Please do that. We have a number of projects like that, and we'll be telling you about them as we get into 2025. And please buy my book and tell other people about it. You know, again, we are never going to be on Oprah's book list. Reese, can't even say her name. Reese Witherspoon is not going to advocate our books for revolution. The only way that people can know about literature designed to help them understand how to organize for a better world, which is what my book is if you tell them. So if you don't tell them, they won't know. So if you want to do nothing to help our struggle, then don't tell anybody about any of this work. And that's exactly what you'll be doing. It's not about whether you want to support me. I'm not getting any gains from this book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I'm getting no gains from it. Every cent that I raise for it is directed towards the anti-fascist work that we are doing to build an anti-fascist capacity so that we can defend ourselves as communities. The book is only $8 US. You can go to Amazon and do that. So please do that. We appreciate all of you. Thank you for joining us. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your day.